Before I get into the lesson, I want to really address you out in, you here, but you in the TV land. I know we have several of you that watch, and I appreciate that you're out there, and we really appreciate it when you'll make a note, let us know that you're out there. But I have a favor to ask, doesn't cost a thing. If you would, just tell a friend about it. Share what's going on. If it's meaning something to you, let them know there's a place they can tune in. They can tune in live on Wednesday night. They can watch the recording later. But let them know that you've found a place that's preaching the Bible, that's teaching God's Word, that it's meaning something to you. And if you would, go to our Facebook page, make a comment on our YouTube page, and let us know and let others know how much it's helping you. I'd really appreciate that. Not to build us up, not to stroke us, but to help others find a place they can learn about God. We are in Discovering and Developing Your Spiritual Gift. This is Lesson 5-4. I decided to call this whole section Lesson 5 and do sub-lessons. And so we are in that. And we are in the lesson of the spiritual gift of giving tonight. And it has some differences we may not naturally think of, the gift of giving. Gift of giving is the ability to earn and give money for the advancement of God's work, and to do so with such wisdom and cheerfulness that the recipients are immeasurably blessed by the transaction. When we started this study on spiritual gifts, part of what we found in the Scripture is that they're given to the believers, but they're given to the believers for the benefit of others. We benefit, but it's for the benefit of others. Whatever our gift is, we are to use to benefit others. God is putting together a family. It's a term we like. You can almost think of it as a machine. A machine has various parts, and each part has a function. And that's the way it is in God's family. He has put together people, and He endows those people with a spiritual gift, and He meshes those gifts together to try to get the total task done. And when we don't use our gift, when we don't do what we can do within what He's given us to do, we hurt the family. We hurt the process. The phrase has been going through my mind today as I've thought about maybe some future comments. That old phrase that you know, you've heard, if you're not part of the solution, what? You're part of the problem. Even if you're not actively working against it, if you're not helping, you're hurting. You're a drag on everyone. And so for those who aren't picking up their mantle, as Elijah did, they're hurting the total work, and we can do that. So we need to be aware of what God's endowed us with. We need to be aware of where He wants us to use it and how He wants us to use it. So that's what we're doing tonight, what we've been doing these weeks. And tonight we're looking at this gift of giving. So once again, God gives people with the gift of giving the ability to make money. And I've known people like that. They just seem to make it without even trying. It takes work on my part. I'm not one of those. I don't have the gift of giving. But there are some people that just do it. But God doesn't intend them to keep it for themselves. They're to be a conduit. That doesn't mean they have to give everything away. They're not supposed to become a pauper, go around in rags. But they're supposed to let that flow through them under His leadership to help others. And so that's the gift of giving. It comes from the Greek word, of course, meta didomi, which means to give a share of. Meta is with, and didomi is give. So to share with. It's given to us to share with. And we have a couple of verses that amplify that. Ephesians 4:28 says, anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share, metadidoma, with those in need. So God intends for us to work, to receive, to use, to help others. There are others less fortunate. There are others who truly can't do for themselves. And there are others out there, though, who can. And some are lazy, but some truly need help, and we need to help those. Another one is Luke 3:1. John answered, anyone who has 2 shirts should share, metadidomi, with the one who has none, and anyone who has food should do the same, Luke 3:11. So we are to share what we are given, what we have out of our excess. There's the parable Jesus told us of the man who had a particularly bountiful crop one year, and he filled all his grain bins. And he said to himself, he was very satisfied at night. He said, "Self, you had all your grain bins are full. Now you can relax, you can eat, drink, and be happy." In other words, take care of himself. He wasn't taking his abundance and sharing it. And what did God say to him? "Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee." Now that's not going to be the judgment upon everybody that does that, but in this case, that was Jesus' parable to one who had a particularly selfish attitude. Joseph, when he went to Egypt, was wise, and God led him that in the good years, he had that dream of the 7 fat cows, the 7 lean cows. God told him there's going to be 7 good years, 7 bad years. And he led the Egyptians, instead of just feasting it all on themselves, using it for their benefit, to store that up so that in the lean years they would have some to go on, that they could feed themselves and help others. That's a good example to us, a good lesson to us about saving and investing when we're having the good times to cover the bad times. But again, not just for ourselves. So we're going to look at this person with the gift of giving and some of their attributes. The person with the gift of giving will possess the ability to make wise purchases and investments. This does not mean that the person is necessarily wealthy. You can make wise investments when you don't have much. You need to make wise investments when you don't have much. When you got a lot, you can kind of afford to make some bad decisions. You're going to lose a lot more, but you kind of got some padding there. But when you don't have much, you especially need to be wise. So it really doesn't have any question to do with wealth. It's stewardship of what you get. And as Christians, we need to remember the Bible teaches we are stewards, not owners. God blesses us with what we have. He gives it into our care that we are to use to His glory, to His benefit, to take care of us too, but also to take care of others. A steward is one who manages for another. We are stewards of what God gives us. He doesn't give it to us to where we take ownership and hoard it for ourselves. So the person with the gift of giving has that ability to be wise in their purchase and investments. They will give quietly to effective projects and ministry. They often desire that their sources not be published, that they not be published, that they have done this. They're not looking for glory. They're not looking for attention. They just want to help people. They understand they've been blessed by God. They want to bless others. And so they do it, not necessarily in secret, but in private. When our children were growing up, we talked to them about the difference of being private as opposed to keeping secrets. You typically teach children it's not good to keep secrets, especially from mom and dad. But there are also things you teach them. You don't run and go tell everybody, put all your news on the street as it goes. There's things you keep private. That's not wrong. And so giving can be kept private. And that's, of course, why part of what we do here at Campbellsburg and most churches with people's offerings. There are only a few who count that. There's a rotating group that counts it so that no one person knows what's done every single day, every single offering. And so we try to keep that private, and we don't publish what people give. We publish the total that's given, but we don't put up a roster where people can judge each other. We keep that private It's not trying to keep it secret, but it's keeping it private. And so a person with the gift of giving enjoys keeping what they do private. They do it for their joy between them and the Father, not for somebody else's praise. A person with the gift of giving may attempt to use his giving to motivate others to give. That others see the benefit of giving, and so then they want to do that. They follow the example. They see that when you give, you get. When you give, you gain. It's not a prosperity theology I'm talking about. It's not give 1,000, the Lord will give you 2,000. That's not what I'm saying. The Lord rewards in many, many ways. If you'll look at Malachi 3, the chapter on tithing that most people don't want preached on, and God talks about where you have robbed me. But notice what he says, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, and what does he say? I will make your crops not cast their fruit. I will keep the locust away. I will bring benefits to you. He doesn't say when you give something that he'll bring money back from heaven falling down. There's many ways to bless. How many of us would almost give up everything we have to be completely 100% healthy? That health is so important. Well, that's the way God blesses. Instead of having us get money, he can keep us healthy. That saves money, doesn't it? Healthcare is a big cost. So God blesses in many, many ways. It's not a tit for tat that he does, but he does bless. And he promises to bless. He says, test me in this. The Lord Almighty wants us to test him to see if his promises are not true. And so a person with the gift of giving may use their giving to motivate others to give. They also prefer to give without the pressure of appeals. They don't really like somebody coming to them, pitching a sale. I don't know if any of us like that, pitching something to us. We'd like to be aware of a situation. If we can help, if we want to help, we help. We don't necessarily want a big issue out of it, but we help where we can. But when somebody comes and harangues us and pressures us, well, one, it takes the joy out of it a little bit. The freely given gift is the best gift. The child that brings the parent a dandelion because it's a pretty yellow flower, not knowing it's a weed, but just wanting to give beauty to their parent, that's a precious gift. But having to be told to do something lessens that gift. So they don't want the pressure of appeal. A person with the gift of giving delights in discovering that his gift is an answer to specific prayer. That's meaningful to tell them that this helped me, that I am better because of that gift. And it doesn't have to be addressed to that person. If someone here receives a gift from someone anonymously, they can come to the church and say, I was in trouble, I needed some finances, I needed some help, and this gift was given to me, and it made my life easier, made my life better. That person sitting here will hear that. They will know they're the ones. So they don't need that direct thanks like that, but it will bless them to know, one, that the gift was used wisely. I think all of us have been in that state at one time or another in our long life where we have given somebody some money, let's say, to make it easy, and they just didn't use it, they squandered it. When I was pastor down in Louisville, Davis Memorial Baptist Church was right across the street from a liquor store, and people would stop in and want money. And we would help them, but too often we would see them walk across the street to the liquor store. And one of the things I always wanted to do there, I never got it done, was up the road we had a Shoney's at the time, and I wanted to work with Shoney's to get a voucher, to where I could give them a voucher. They could take it, get a good meal. Shoney would then let us, we'd either pre-buy them or pay them for the voucher. Sometimes I think about that here, that we do that. Maybe it's something to talk about. But none of us like that when we give while we've worked hard to earn to someone, And maybe they don't squander it on liquor or drugs, but they go out and instead of feeding their family, they buy a big boat or a fast sports car. They don't take care of the right thing. Guess what? We ain't going to give it to them again, are we? Once burned, twice shy. And that's understandable. So a person with the gift of giving likes to know that their gift was used wisely to answer a specific prayer. If they're married, a person with the gift of giving may seek, and probably should seek, their partner's counsel in the amount of a gift. That marriage two become one. And so they will seek, they'll appreciate their partner's counsel. A person with the gift of giving desires to feel a part of the work or person to whom they give. And so they want to be part of a team rather than to just be seen as a benefactor that's taken advantage of. That's one way they feel. They want to feel like they're part of a team helping, and that's appreciated, that's working to solve a problem. Now, we always look at pitfalls, person with the gift of giving. They can be viewed as materialistic instead of spiritual because they deal with large sums of money or material goods. So their focus, because they're able to make money or be successful in business, people can assume that they're involved, that their joy is in that materialism, that that's where they are. And sometimes, we can't help how people perceive things. People typically will perceive things the wrong way, the negative way, not the good way. We cannot completely help that, but we can see if there's a way we can somehow give the impression that we're using it to help others, that it isn't the material goods. I've known some people, I do know some people, some good friends, who seem to have this gift of giving. They've been very successful in life. And I also know they have helped people after people after people, even around the world. And you wouldn't know it to look at them. You'd think they're average Joe out on the street. They don't put on airs. They don't dress in Armani suits. They just go about their business. But when they see a need, they address it. That's a person with the gift of giving. A person with the gift of giving may appear to attempt to control a work or person because of his interest and desire to increase the effectiveness of a ministry. In other words, they may say, I'll give to this project, but I'd like to see it go along this way. They'd like to have some say in how that is administered, not because they're trying to be controlling, but they're trying to make sure that their gift is being used properly. I had, when we built the other church, we wanted to put up a carillon up in the tower. And I had a man that kind of he wanted to give to that, but he wanted assurances it would be used for that. Why? Because he'd given money before and it wasn't used how he gave it. So he wasn't trying to be controlling, but that's what his heart was, to help, is to give in that way. And we honored that. We did as he asked. We used it for how they said. We do our best to do that. Under my pastorate, I know some past history, that we try, when people designate a gift for a purpose, we try to make sure we use it for that purpose, and we have taken steps to ensure that we do that we keep it separated in order to honor their desire. Now, there are people who do try to control. There are people who just want a plaque with their name on it, and that's unfortunate. Then they do have those improper reasons to give. But the person with a gift of giving, with a heart of giving from God, doesn't have that. Finally, a person with the gift of giving may attempt to encourage others to give, may appear as pressure tactics. They may be so driven through their giving that they are overpowering, overwhelming to others' giving. And perhaps they don't, there's different ways. They don't take into account, some people just can't. We don't really know everybody's burden. We don't know what they're struggling. We don't know their debt. that for the most part, we don't know. So we shouldn't assume they can give because we don't know what they're doing. We can only encourage and suggest that they do that. So a person with the gift of giving may find so much joy in their giving that they put undue pressure on others and not understand their situation. So that's some of the attributes with the person and pitfalls with the gift of giving. Let's go on and see if we can get another one in tonight. The gift of ruling. The word I like better is administration. That's what it's really talking about. Ruling has the connotation of a dictator over people, the master of a manor, the king. They are rulers. But the word here, the ruling word here, really means a systematic means. Rules to follow is what it's talking about. Organization. And we know that we need organization. So a person with the gift of ruling has the gift to lead, to coordinate the activities of others for the achievement of a common goal. So that's different. That's not dictating, but they have an ability to see the big picture, to see the attributes of people, and to marshal that in an organized pattern so that the work is effective instead of everybody trying to do one job, trying to do the wrong job, and things go undone. So they have that ability. The word for that, got to look down here, parastemi, to stand before, to lead. Pro, before, estemi, to stand. And so it's one who leads, who stands before the others. And I'll put that in wrong. There we go. So they have that ability. 1 Timothy 5:17, the elders who direct the affairs, that's that word, of the church will be well or worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. So someone who is this one who can go before the people, to stand up, to lead, and does it well, is worthy of extra honor, because we all know what it's like to try to marshal a group to get something done. It's hard enough when you're the employer. It's even more fun when it's volunteers. Next verse, Timothy 3:4. The elder must manage, prostatemi, his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. Interesting story I was reading. I was watching a YouTube video on Dale Evans. Very interesting. I was a little young when she was around. I knew Roy Rogers and Dale, but they started long before my time. So it was really interesting to hear. And she was a very faithful wife to Roy Rogers. But they talk about after he passed and things were gone, she started opening up some. And she loved him, she supported him, but it came out that he was a harsh father. He could be very harsh on the children. To the world, he was seen as his hero and a great cowboy. And he was a great man, but he did have some harshness and in ruling over his children. So this is talking about, this is actually a deacon, I said elder, must manage their own family well. They ought to be able to keep their family going in the right direction, but it says, do so in a manner worthy of full respect. The Bible also says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. We fathers can do that. We can be overly harsh, overly demanding. We set a standard, and we need to set a standard for them, but we also need to have some of that velvet where we hug them when they fail, and we help them to go on, to pick up and move on. So we need that steel and velvet that I talked about on Father's Day. And that's what a person that this verse is describing here. 1 Thessalonians 5:12. Now we ask you, brothers and sisters, to acknowledge those who work, prostatemi, hard among you, who care for you in the Lord, and to admonish you. And of course, that admonish means correct. It's more than encourage. It means to correct there. And we all need that. We all need to be reminded from time to time of the task at hand, of how we need to come back. But we need to acknowledge those people who work hard, who care for the Lord, and who do what they need to do to keep us on the right path. So, attributes of the person with the gift of ruling. They're able to see the overall picture of a goal before him. I put in there global thinker. There are some people that can't see the forest for the trees. They'll worry, I talked about that some time back, then paralysis by analysis. A person with the gift of ruling or administration can see the big picture, and they can see what needs to happen to get from point A to point B, and they can make those steps. And so that they can see that goal down there, and then they can see how to marshal the resources to get to that goal. They possess an inner motivation to organize that for which they are responsible. They don't go at a job haphazardly. They don't do it just willy-nilly. When they're given a task, they will think about it, they will organize it, and they will be methodical in what they do. Person with the gift of administration. They desire to complete a task as quickly as possible. They don't like to waste time. They don't like to spin their wheels. They want to get to it, knock it out, and move on to the next task. A person with the gift of administration has the ability to identify resources necessary to complete the task. That's very important when you have a task in front. You need to be able to know, if you're building a house, what kind of foundation you're going to need, what your kind of walls you're going to need to put on that foundation. You need to be able to put all of that together, how much wood you're going to need. I'm trying to think, it's popping in my head, that parable of which talks about how many of us, if we're wise, when we're given a task, will first sit down, think about that task. What do I need to accomplish to do that task, instead of just running out, doing the first thing on your mind. And I think we've known some people like that. I think I've done it from time to time. I'm so eager to do something, I jump into the middle of it instead of at the beginning. And then I either fail completely, or I have to stop, go back, and repeat work. So, a person with the gift of administration has that ability to identify resources necessary, and that's a very valuable ability. They are aware of what can and cannot be delegated. That's really a resource management. We can degrade people by thinking of them as resources, but people are resources. When we have a task here that we want to accomplish, part of the resource is people to do that work, and we need people with varying abilities. We don't reduce them to just a machine. We're another a person with feelings, with intellect, with value, but they are a resource. Well, a person with the gift of administration is aware of what they can delegate those particular people and what can't be delegated. In other words, what they need to do. A wise boss will not give something that only he can do in his position to an underling. That's one of the worst feelings, when you're under somebody and they give you a task, but you don't have what you need to do the task. You don't have the authority, you don't have the resources, but what does he say? I don't care, get it done. That's the most annoying thing I think I ever expressed in business, is when they would do that. There's some things that only those in certain positions can do that they cannot delegate. They must do that. A person with the gift of ruling, with administration, understands that. A person with the gift of administration may have a tendency to stand back until asked to take a given responsibility. That's really pretty wise. They're not just jumping into every job, overextending themselves. You see, part of that ability to marshal resources is knowing how much I can take on. And if we take on too much, we can't do any of our jobs well. So this is really talking about management of self, that they may step back. If asked, they'll consider it, and they'll see if they can take it. I had some wise advice I got from a pastor I worked for one time is, Wes, don't give a job to the person who asks for it. That's interesting. Very often, it's not from pure motives. Typically, if they're really wanting to do it, they're stayed back, and when you ask them, they'll do it. But the one who wants to do it is looking for something else. They're looking for glory. They're looking for gain, fame. They're looking for something. And so they're not, never say never, never say always. You got to use wisdom. But I thought that was interesting there. Don't give a job to somebody who says they want it. Because if they're smart, they don't want the task. They don't want more work. Would be one way to look at it. And so if they're volunteering, there's probably an ulterior motive, or they don't fully understand the situation. A person with the administration understands that. They are willing to endure negative reactions in order to accomplish the ultimate goal. Sermon I was thinking of today, it may get delivered here before long, it's out of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, of course, had the burden to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. He went there. Nehemiah's a tremendously wonderful study. Maybe we'll do it on Wednesday night. Because what does he do when he first gets there? He goes out by himself at night and surveys the work. He doesn't get a big committee. He doesn't get the whole town to come and look. He goes out and surveys it, and he comes back and gives his report. There's a lot of wisdom there. As he continues to work, he starts having all these people. Now, these people were minor rulers in the area who didn't like Nehemiah coming in and building the town, and they started being critical and running down his work. And Nehemiah actually had to make his people soldier builders in order to protect it. But the sermon I think of, and I'm pretty sure the phrase is from Spirity Agnew. Y'all remember him? That's what's fun, talking to you guys, because you know these names. Young ones don't know them. Spirity Agnew, nattering nabobs of negativity. I love that phrase. I love that wordplay. That's what he had. Nehemiah had nattering nabobs of negativity. They weren't trying to help the work. They were trying to run it down, and they were underhanded. They were inviting him to dinner, and then they were going to accuse him of hobnobbing with the elite instead of the people. Nehemiah was smarter than that. He wouldn't do it. Nattering nabobs. We all run into nattering nabobs of negativity. And a wise leader, a wise administrator, is able to discern what is good advice and bad advice, what is trying to help, what is trying not to help. Something I'm pleased with, again, I think this same pastor, I have no trouble ranting and fussing and all that. I've tried to sit on it a little better. But back then I got concerned about it, and I went to my pastor, talked about that, and he said, Wes, he said, you're not, I think what he said, you're not a fusser. When you are pointing out stuff, you're trying to make it better. And there are some that do that when they are pointing out problems. It's not being critical of the person. It's not running them down. It's assessing the situation, trying to offer help. It can sound like fussing, complaining, but the other thing that's often behind it is a willingness to step in and take care of part of it. So this administrator here is willing to exert negative reaction. There's people out there that will, are couch coaches or the peanut gallery. In the movie, The American President, Michael Douglas was the president. Martin Sheen was his chief of state. And there was a time when the president gets upset with his chief of staff, says, how does it feel from the cheap seats, making comments? And the chief of staff, in this case, came back and said, wait a minute, I've been with you through this whole struggle. I'm not in the cheap seats, I'm with you. But the president just felt that criticism and thought it was easy. He had the load, he had to carry the weight. And it's easy, and we know that. It's easy for people who don't have it to carry the weight. Another story, another friend, that good friend, good man, and he wasn't a part of my church, but we were friends. He'd come out, Wes, you ought to do this, Wes, you ought to do that. And he wasn't really being critical, but he was being critical. And I'd say to him, something said to me years ago when I was at First Baptist Atlanta, said, I'm glad you noticed that. How about you take care of it? The Lord's laid that on your heart. He said, Wes, you said that to me before, and I resent it. It offends me. And his name was Larry. I said, well, Larry, if it's not important, if you have the idea and it's not important enough for you to do it, why should it be important enough for me to do it? It's your idea, not mine. And he said, well, you got a point there. But so it's easy to sit back and say, well, somebody else ought to do. It's different. It's different. But a person in leadership understands that. They're willing to put up with it. They go home, they kick the dog, whatever they got to do to get over it. But they stay to the task. Moving on. They experience fulfillment in seeing all the pieces come together and others enjoying the finished project. They don't need to be on the dais getting the attention. Their joy comes from the project being completed and people enjoying the project. That's where their joy comes from. They possess a desire to move to a new challenge when the task is completed. They're not like the rich man that says, sit back, eat, drink, and be happy. No, they're on to the next challenge. Now, they do have some pitfalls. A person with the gift of ruling or administration may appear calloused and cold because he's unwilling to endure criticism and yet is not diverted from his goal. It really upsets people when they're getting in your face and they're fussing and you're the duck on the water. You appear cool and calm and it doesn't ruffle you, it doesn't dissuade you from what you're doing. That really irritates them. But that's not really how a person with the gift of administration are. They hear what's being said to them and they consider it, but not right in that heat of the moment. They'll do it. They may leave those under him or her feeling as if they're being used because he doesn't explain all the details and reasons for a given task. Sometimes you can't do that. You have to say, I need you to do this. Sometimes there are things that you have to give instruction like that and you can't give all the background because it entails business about other people or factors that the person you're talking to is not privy to. I don't know you as deacons, me as pastor. Sometimes I don't know if people understand the things we know that we can't share. That when we're, say, as your pastor leading in a direction and we're thinking about somebody to fill a job, there could be situations I'm aware of that makes them not a good candidate, but I'm not at liberty to share what that is. You understand? I may know somebody has a drinking problem or a problem at home or something like that, that you wouldn't want them in that position. I can't share that. So I have to make a position and I just have to live with it, whether it's understood or not. But they're willing to understand that, but it may leave people thinking that he doesn't think much of them because he won't share the details. It may appear that he is more interested in projects than people. That's a real pitfall, that they are very task-oriented, and they can overly see people as a resource and not people, and so they have to be careful of that. They may desire to accomplish a task swiftly. Their desire to accomplish it swiftly may appear to be insensitivity to the schedule, weariness, or priority of others. One of the things I try to keep in mind here, you can understand I get very frustrated. There's so much I want to accomplish, so much I want to do, and I have people I wish would get involved, but I stop to think, they're putting in 40 plus hours a week. They got other lives, and I need to be cognizant of that. It's unfair to put pressure on them to do something in disregard to the rest of the life they have. but it is frustrating. And if you do that, that insensitivity can certainly upset people. So those are some attributes and pitfalls of a person with the gift of ruling or administration. I remind you again, on the back sheet is a self-evaluation that you can just, first off, just quick answer. Does this fit you not at all, some, or does this fit you to a T? That should be a quick decision. Then the next one is, what traits that we just went through do you see evidence? That takes a little more thought. You go through, read these again, say, yeah, I do C and E or G, I'm that, and I struggle with the pitfall of B. And then just for fun, you get to grade your pastor. Maybe when we go through all of these, I'll ask what your grade is and see what you think. But we need all of these gifts. We need people with the gift of giving, that God is blessed with that ability, but has the heart to use it for the good of God's kingdom, this church. We need people with the ability to administrate, to be able to organize a task, to be able to organize a people to accomplish a job, so that we don't waste resources, we don't waste people's time. I try to value people's time. Directing choir, part of the way I do that, I'd like to get to do it again, is being sure if something starts at 6 o'clock, I'm ready at 6 o'clock. You're not sitting here waiting on me. You've given up your time to be here. You're giving up your time and ready to go home. So I need to get through the material and say good night. Like my mama told me, stand up, speak up, shut up, and sit down. But we need to appreciate people's time.